Welcome into the Horseshoe, ladies and gentlemen, for the Monday after Ohio State's first idle week of the season. That's the 41-year vet, Tim May. That's Andy Backstrom, and that's just me, Spencer Holbrook. We are here to talk about college football and the things that we saw over the weekend, because we don't get to see a lot of college football other than the Scarlet and Gray on any given weekend because of how much we're locked in here in the Horseshoe or when they go on the road. So we get the week off. We're going to make sure to watch a lot of football. Let's break it down. Tim, if there's anything you learned about college football on Saturday that pertains to Ohio State, or you can draw for the Ohio State audience, what would it be?
Well, I watched a lot of Solheim Cup, so.
Okay.
No, I'm just joking. That Oregon's going to be really good when Ohio State plays at Oregon.
Yeah.
Oregon found itself. I was doing some work outside and moved back inside to watch the much of the second half, but they were struggling to a certain extent against Oregon State. Dylan Gabriel's been really good at getting the team from like the 10 to the 10, but getting them from there in had been a little bit of a struggle the first couple of games. Boy, they popped that bubble big time.
Yeah.
Oregon is a really good team. I still have some questions about them from a dominant or big-time defensive team. That'll be answered on October the 12th, one way or the other. But just as an overall team, they really turned on the Jets there. They were playing at Oregon State, which is only, 45, 50 miles away. One of the great rivalries in college football. Good thing the Civil War is still going on, at least in Oregon. And we'll see how long that lasts. But number one, I was impressed by Oregon in the second half, the way they took control of that game and just smashed the Beavers.
Yeah, I thought it was an impressive second half too, because we haven't seen them put their foot on the gas and kind of race past an opponent yet.
Right.
Whether it be Idaho when they played really well and couldn't seem to score points, or whether it be, I think, Boise State last week
with their great running back.
Yeah, when they just let Boise hang around and needed 2 kick return touchdowns to win that game even. So to see them separate, you're starting to see Oregon get it figured out, and maybe they needed a couple weeks with the transfers and things like that. Andy, I know you watched a lot of college football. What did you learn maybe that pertains to the Ohio State football schedule that you can take away?
I don't know if it's necessarily anything I learned, because it's just continuing the pattern of Michigan and that offense just not being very good. And Davis Warren only had 3 incompletions, but they were all interceptions.
Yeah.
He's thrown 6 interceptions so far this year. They had Alex Orji in for a little bit, up and down there with him at quarterback. And so I think their quarterback situation is a big problem. And their offensive line is still trying to gel together. They only scored 28 points against Arkansas State. They only won by 10 points. And they haven't had a decisive victory outside of the Fresno State game, which was 24 points. But in the fourth quarter, that was a 1-score game. So far, they just have not been able to get things together offensively. I'm sure Sharon Moore, coming from his position as offensive coordinator, offensive line coach, just hasn't been very good in those categories. And I'm sure that bugs him, being a full-time head coach. And those were his assignments previously. So a lot of turnover there with the roster and the staff. And they're trying to get those things sorted out. But that line for that game at the end of November is just going up and up and up, which I just think increases the pressure more for Ohio State. I don't think it matters what the line is. There's a hurdle that Ohio State has to get over, regardless of what Michigan's record is going into that game. It's still going to be a huge game, and there's still a huge mental hurdle that Ohio State has to leap.
Yeah, that's one of the big things that I took away is watching Michigan. Like, how do these guys score on good defenses? They couldn't score on Texas. For most of that game, a couple field goals. They got that garbage time touchdown that doesn't really matter. It was hard. They just make everything look hard, and I don't know where they go, because they obviously don't trust Alex Orji enough to be the starting. Well, Tim, you got your GPS signal.
Yeah,
on. I know. They obviously
had a
don't.
hard time finding the stadium this morning.
Okay, yeah, you've been trying to do it for 40 years.
Turn that off.
They don't trust Orji enough to give him full control of the offense. They don't trust Davis Warren enough to let it rip, if you will, because I don't know if he has that gear in him. It just doesn't look like a good situation. And maybe Jack Tuttle comes back and looks good, but like, how do they score on an Oregon on November 2nd? How do they score this week against a pretty feisty, if nothing else, USC defense? So like, I have my questions. But
I think that's going to be a very interesting game to watch.
I do too.
Because I think USC, I was impressed by what USC did against LSU defensively. We talked about that right after that game, is how sound USC was on defense. They didn't make every play, but they had guys lining up correctly. There's a plan there. The Anton Lynn, I don't know why I can't say that. It always takes me 3 shots. but clearly they've shaken things up at Troy, and this could be very interesting in the sense of USC could put a knot on their head. I'm talking about Michigan.
Yeah,
at home. That would, like I keep coming back to the word interesting because you still aren't really sure as USC, back. You always know USC is going to score some points, but like we talked about Ohio State several years ago, it only had to be 25 or 30% better defensively to be a really good team. You know what I mean? When Jim Knowles showed up. So, yeah, the Big House is going to be interesting.
Yeah, if they get to 2-2, I think it's trouble for Michigan. The big thing that I learned though from watching college football is the Big Ten stinks. Okay, the bottom of the Big Ten is as bad as I've seen it. Washington loses to Washington State in Seattle.
But that was expected, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't expected. Washington State was the underdog.
Site.
Do you know why? You know why I know Washington State was? You know why I know Washington State was the underdog? Because I made money on it.
Oh,
Washington is not good. Iowa struggled against.
Insiders thought that was very much a distinct possibility. Now, go ahead.
Iowa struggled with Troy for most of the game. Troy is terrible, and Iowa struggled with Troy. Indiana went to UCLA and beat the you-know-what out of UCLA in the Rose Bowl.
Well, they ended up winning by a narrow margin.
Wisconsin, I understand it's Alabama. I get it. I do. I promise. I understand.
Let's talk about quarterbacks.
Wisconsin stinks.
Well, they lost their starting quarterback.
They're no good. He was 5 of 5 for 16 yards. He wasn't throwing the ball down the field. He wasn't doing that. Game would not have been competitive. No, if Joe Montana, prime Joe Montana, was playing quarterback for Wisconsin.
Texas is the number 2 team in the country, or number 1 team in the country.
I don't. Go ahead, what does that mean? I'm talking about the Big Ten.
Nobody picked Wisconsin to win the Big Ten.
That's why I said.
I'm just picking holes in your argument.
I said the middle to the bottom of the Big Ten stinks.
Yeah.
It's not any good. Like, where is for 3 quarters, Maryland struggles at Virginia, and I understand it's a rivalry game, but like, they just lost to Michigan State too, and I don't think Michigan State's that good. They struggle with FAU. The middle tier to the bottom of the Big Ten is bad. And when your 4th and 5th best teams, and this is not an offense to Nebraska, who I think is going to give Ohio State a little bit of a challenge here in late October. That's not a slight on them. They're playing well. It's not a slight on Illinois. But right now, in the current state of the league, when you're middle of the pack, when the beef of your league is Illinois, Nebraska, and a Michigan team that doesn't know that the forward pass is legal, you have problems. And I think the Big Ten is really weak in the lower middle to the bottom of the league. And I don't like what I'm seeing from the league right now. I just don't.
Yeah.
I think there's too much garbage at the bottom.
I understand.
I don't like it.
Yeah, I just think some of those games are hard to put in perspective from a standpoint of what it means down the road. I do think Iowa's better offensively than it was a year ago. But
what does that even?
Not saying much.
Yeah,
you're right. Yeah.
Number 2, I think Michigan State under Jonathan Smith is finding their way. Let's put it that way. That will be an interesting test for Ohio State. It's first road game of the year next week, which we'll get to next week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Playing 2 straight teams in a row that their main color is green. That's got to mess with you a little bit. But maybe that's green light for the Ohio State defense to get after them.
Excuse me.
And then, but Indiana, I think anybody can see Kurt Cignetti's done a pretty good job, at least reviving some things at Indiana. Nobody thought UCLA was going to do much this year.
No.
I didn't.
No.
So, I see where you're coming from. I'm just trying to prolong the conversation here because what you said makes sense, but 3 games into the year, I don't really judge, anything. Vanderbilt beats Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech creams Marshall. What does all that mean?
Well, it means that Marshall is not any good, and Virginia Tech is not as good as we thought they were. But here's the problem, Tim. You say we're only 3 games in the year. Well, guess what? The season's a quarter of the way over. So we have to draw. This is a small sample size sport. This isn't 100. This isn't
pretty good.
This isn't 162 games. It's not 82 like the pros. It's not even 18 like we get in the NFL, 18 weeks. This is 12 games.
Mississippi State got beat by Toledo.
Yes. So you have to draw conclusions from 2 or 3 games.
Sure, and I'm just saying every league has got their dregs.
I just think the Big Ten, the bottom of the Big Ten, is bad this year. I do.
I mean, I think the Pac-12 went 1-1 this weekend.
A 2-pack. Look, I think the Big Ten has a lot of rebuilding teams. UCLA, rebuild. I mean, Chip Kelly leaves in February. Deshaun Foster has almost an impossible job. Purdue, they're still in the second year of Ryan Walters' tenure. They did not look.
Did you leave that game out?
They look like a
They
disaster.
looked disastrous
You can
against
say
Notre
it.
Dame for sure.
It reminded me of Michigan State when they came in here, whatever it was, and we're down 40. What was that? 42 nothing at the half.
49.
49 nothing at the half.
Jonathan Smith, you mentioned him, Michigan
Yeah.
State, that's also a rebuild. Like, you go down the line, Washington lost pretty much their entire roster, rebuild under
True.
Jed Fish. Like, there's so many teams that you mentioned that they're rebuilding.
It's early.
And it's early. And I think that that's just going to be the league right now. Yeah, it's 18 teams. Yeah, you want to be right near the SEC. But, like, the bottom line, as you say, Tim, is that there's a lot of programs that are trying to put the pieces back together during this huge transition. And I don't think it's that surprising that there have been that many teams that don't look very good right now.
I agree.
But I also
100%.
think that there are some teams behind the top group that we expected. Like, we expected Ohio State to be very good. We expected, Penn State to be around that pack. Oregon, USC's been better than expected. Michigan's probably been worse than expected. But then Nebraska and Illinois have been, a bit surprising of how good they've been so far, especially Illinois. I think a lot of people had Illinois in the bottom 4 of the league. So I still think there's good aspects of the league right now of teams where you're like, oh, and then by the way, Rutgers could be good too. We don't really know about them.
Herein lies the problem. And I know, again, I understand we're 3 weeks in.
You don't have to apologize.
When-
just say your problem. Say what the problem is.
And this is because the Big Ten gets paid so much money for the Tiffany brands to be good. When the middle of your league is Rutgers, Illinois, Indiana, and quite frankly, the way that they've played the last 20 years, if it's Rutgers, Indiana, Illinois, and Nebraska, that's not good enough. You need, if
Nebraska's undefeated.
I know
Rutgers
that.
is undefeated.
I'm saying as a program. I'm not talking about is a
Well, I know,
2024
but you have to give people the right to get better.
Yes.
Rutgers has gotten incrementally better every year in the second phase of the coach's tenure.
Again,
You understand what I'm saying? Matt Rule shows up at Nebraska. He has proven he can be a really good college football coach because he has a plan, clearly. And they've got a freshman quarterback playing a little bit out of his gourd, in my opinion. But the guy that committed to Ohio State that everybody thought was incredible 2 years ago. And Dylan Raiola playing extremely well, in my opinion, for a freshman. These teams have gotten better for many reasons, one of which is their coaching is really good.
yes, but you have a year 2 Luke Fickell that does not look it should.
You shouldn't judge by that game, Sam.
Okay, well, I will.
All right.
You have
They're not going to win it. Nobody picked them to even contend for the national championship this year. Alabama clearly has the guns to do that now.
You get the crap kicked out of you at home. That's not acceptable. I just don't think the Big Ten is as strong as it needs to be through 3 weeks. I think for example, the Wisconsin Alabama is a one. In my opinion, then scrap that one entirely.
It's not a referendum game. That game went almost exactly the way I thought it would. I thought Wisconsin would play them tough early. My baby brother, who's 66 years old, Tony, he and his wife actually went to that game because they're big Alabama fans, living in Texas. Had a great time, enjoyed the jump around, and tried to keep from getting run over when everybody left right after the jump around. So, some things were expected. There was a possibility Wisconsin might play them tough, but there's a good possibility Alabama put a knot on their head. Alabama put a knot on their head.
Okay, my point is that Indiana should not beat UCLA by 30. It's Indiana. I know UCLA's rebuilding. That tells me that the Big Ten isn't as strong as it needs to be. These are the things that I'm trying to consider when I'm talking about where the league wants to be.
But are you giving Indiana any credit?
Yes, I am giving it. But as a program, they should not be at the upper tier of the Big Ten.
Well, some guys did well in transfer portal and the transfer portal.
You talk about Washington is rebuilding. Guess what?
They are.
Washington State just got kicked to the entire curb by everyone else in college football.
That doesn't matter.
And then they beat Washington. That's not good enough for the Big Ten. That's all my point is.
Okay, but that doesn't matter. You know that doesn't matter.
It does matter.
You can have a good team and not be in the Big Ten.
I know that, but I want the Big Ten to be better. And I don't think the Big Ten's good enough.
Plus, Washington State's a cornerstone of the new improved Pac-12.
I understand.
Which only has 6 members.
Tim, I understand all of these things. The Big Ten isn't as good as it needs to be.
Okay, I know, but I think you're being a little hyperbolic.
Okay.
I mean, just because you got to watch about 12 games over the weekend instead of 2 or 1.
Yeah.
You see where I'm going?
I guess, but it's not good enough. Then there's Georgia, who, Andy, we watched the Georgia game together. we Tim, I got this big projector now, and I shined it on the garage.
My older son has one of those.
It was fantastic, so fun. Like the sun goes down, projector comes out, we watched it up on the garage. It was a lot of fun.
So you're not a fan of daylight saving time?
No. So Georgia struggles with Kentucky, and this is the only non-Big Ten thing that we'll really talk about nationally, because Ohio State, obviously, the 1-point loss to Georgia in the Peach Bowl. Last year, they wanted to crack at Georgia. Neither team got it in the playoff. So this year, I know Texas is number 1, but heading into the season, the very clear-cut number 1 and number 2 team in the country, Georgia, Ohio State, and then, as everyone else said around the country, and then everyone else. So we watched Georgia struggle with Kentucky.
Oh, no. I think Texas was in that argument.
Okay, well,
yeah,
that's fine.
Definitely was in that argument.
Okay, well, we'll scrap Texas for now.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about...
They're the number 1 team in the country.
I know, but we'll scrap it.
All right.
Georgia struggles with Kentucky. What did you learn?
I mean, look, they're 2 SEC teams. They're playing at Kentucky, and historically, Kirby Smart's teams have not played great at Kentucky. There have been some dogfights there, and look, it's just the matter of the fact they won the game. They got out of there with a win. I think that's the most important thing. They didn't look overly impressive. I was, kind of surprised that Carson Beck didn't play as well as I would expect him to play, considering he's a top NFL prospect. But that happens. Yeah. It's any good conference, the SEC, Big Ten. I know Kentucky's been really bad so far this year, but it goes back to what we were just talking about. I don't know how much you can really know about some of these teams. They could look terrible through 2 weeks, and then in week 3 put up a fight against the best team in the conference, and that's football.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing about the sport, right?
Yeah.
You can't go in any week and expect to dominate, because if you do, you might get whooped. And it looked
especially
like
on the road.
Yeah, it looked like for a while there that it's going to be upset city. And look, I don't think I learned a ton other than just that no one's unbeatable, and we kind of already knew that. But I will say that Georgia, it's probably better to have this happen now than to have this happen in week 10, 11, 12, 13. You get the sense that they'll bounce back from this. I'm pretty sure they'll be pretty dominant going forward. But
they're off this week. Then they go to
Alabama.
They go to Alabama,
and then they go to Texas later.
I know they got a gauntlet. So if you're going to have mistakes, you might as well have them when you can win against the inferior Kentucky.
That is a hell of a schedule when you look at it, especially now that they look vulnerable. Number 1, number 2, Kentucky had a great defensive scheme that you could see messed with Carson Beck's head.
Yeah,
I mean, they would bring pressure 1 minute, next minute there's some exotic zone coverage kind of thing with some man in. I mean, there are all kinds of things where they mess with their head. And meanwhile, they're messing with my head too, because I'm sitting here going, this team got creamed 31-6 by South Carolina the week before. I mean, I'm talking about Kentucky.
Yeah.
And I'm just, that's what drives people nuts about college football is these are still, some of these guys are making millions of dollars, but they're still like 18 to 22-year-olds.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't show up. Kirby Smart made a great point after that game, though, because I remember, distinctly, Missouri had them on the ropes on the road a couple of years ago at Missouri. And
that wasn't a great Missouri team either. That was before Missouri got to be
before the Missouri of last year. But they were building a program there. You could see that. But the bottom line is Georgia found a way to win that game. That's when I really started paying attention to Stetson Bennett to a certain extent. But Georgia found a way to win at Kentucky on Saturday night. As screwy as things were, they found a way to win the game.
Yeah.
And that's you as the old saying goes, you win so much more by winning a close game on the road than you do by getting your rear end kicked.
Well, Georgia recovered 3 of its own fumbles.
Correct.
And the pick 6 that I still don't know how you overturn that.
Yeah.
But gets called back. So Kentucky, instead of being up 10-0, is up 3-0, and you've got to come down from that emotional high that
Georgia
the crowd
got
was going
outplayed
nuts.
except for like the last 10 minutes of that game, in my opinion.
Yeah, and when they needed to turn it on, they in a small way turned it on. But you always expected for so long Georgia to separate, and I want to see the great teams separate. After the first 10 minutes of that Alabama-Wisconsin game, it was 35-7 Alabama, and it didn't even look close.
Yeah. 2014. I'm just going back in the time machine. 2014, Ohio State should have been beaten by Cincinnati at Cincinnati. Ohio State was playing without Maurice Claret, who had arthroscopic knee surgery.
You said 2014.
What did I say? Oh, yeah, 2002. What did I get? I get them mixed up because in 2002, they went 14-0.
Yeah.
First team ever in college football history to go 14-0. So that's why it messes with my head. Yeah. Cincinnati drops a touchdown pass and then has an interception on the last. But my point is, they're right there. Should have won that game. Gaduli was the quarterback for Cincinnati and stuff. But Ohio State found a way to win the game.
Yeah.
And went on to win the national championship. So, like I said, I don't treat games as referendums in the sense of what's going to happen next week.
Yeah.
But I treat them as just on that day, it's a referendum. This team was better than that team for some reason, one way or the other.
Well,
I think Georgia's still very talented.
Yeah.
And I think the game at Alabama is going to be huge. He said, saying something profound.
So the Dogs and the Crimson Tide both get this week off because they play on September 28th when Ohio State's at Michigan State. While they're on the couch watching the rest of the country, just like we were this past week, Ohio State will be at home in this building on big noon kickoff on Fox.
What's going on with that?
I think it has to do with the draft of the weeks of where Fox got its picks.
I know.
Like Fox.
I know that, but I mean, because they know if they put Ohio State on,
well,
it's going to get a.
I'm
number.
sure Fox would rather have USC Michigan.
Yeah.
But I think CBS had first pick this week.
Oh yeah, I know. I understand all that. It's just really, wow.
Fox is going to take its $2 million for the Ohio State Marshall game and be okay with it. So we'll see Gus and Joel up in the press box on Saturday. Ohio State Marshall. Andy, what do you want to see from Ohio State? We talked about what we want to see from improvement from Ohio State. We talked about this. We talked about that. But like, if it's something you want to hear from Ryan Day that reassures you, like, okay, this team had a good week, off week. We're no longer asking about the off week. We're asking what they did during the off week. What do you want to hear that was accomplished or, pushed forward for Ohio State as it heads, into this little bit of a stretch? You've got Marshall, Michigan State, then Iowa, then Oregon, then you're off again.
Yeah, I think, last year they had the bye week right after the Notre Dame game, and then they played Maryland, and it was not a super impressive performance. They only ran for 62 yards, and that was their fewest in a game since 2011. I think if you're Ohio State, you want to come off the ball, great, and you want to run the football like you did against Western Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they had 10 plays of 10 or more yards on the ground. They had 6 rushing touchdowns. They ran for 273 yards, which is more than they ran for in a game all of last season. You want to run the football just as well against Marshall. You also hope to get Donovan Jackson back. I think that would be a really good thing for the offensive line to start to have some continuity with the 5 that you'd probably see throughout the rest of the season.
Absolutely.
So I think I'm focused more on how do they run the football? Is it as good or close to as good as what they did against Western Michigan? And is the offensive line going to have maybe its best player back in Donovan Jackson, who has All-American capability but hasn't maybe maximized that yet?
I think he hadn't played.
Well,
I think he's
of
talking
course,
about career.
Yeah, last year I felt like he had a slow start, but so we'll see. I think that's where I'm keying in on this.
I actually knew what you meant. I was just being I don't know what I got up on the wrong. I got up on the right side of the bed, the smart aleck side of the bed. But no, I agree with you. I think something. I'm gonna write about this week if you don't mind. I'm already claiming one idea.
I do mind, Tim. You're not allowed.
I know. I'm claiming one idea, and we'll see if I get the actual players to talk about it. But the difference between the offensive line, the way it played in the first game and the second game. I mean, yeah, they were playing 2 overmatched MAC teams, but supposedly increasingly better MAC teams from Akron to Western Michigan. I saw a confidence about the offensive line, not just the way it was coming off the ball, but coming off the ball and hitting the guy they're supposed to hit. You understand what I'm saying? From the standpoint of, I thought the communication up and down the offensive line was really good. Tegra Shabola, I thought, played with a lot of confidence. Austin Cervell, who we've talked about, who's played the first 2 games for Donovan Jackson, I thought he looked really good in that game as the game went on.
Yeah. And
there's something about an offensive line when it kind of gets that little mojo going for it, that little confidence. You're talking about what's 3 times 5? That's
15.
1,500 pounds, sort of moving in the same general direction in one form or another. That's tough to beat. I mean, it's tough to deal with. And I really want to see if they take that next step this week against Marshall, which I think can be run on based on what I've seen. And we'll see. But that, to me, is the most intriguing part about this game coming up.
Well, it's interesting, Andy, because he said, it's supposed to get increasingly tougher as from Akron to Western Michigan to Marshall. The problem with that theory, and I agreed with it up until I started looking at the advanced stats, the problem with that is Akron is a much worse team than Western Michigan. But the only thing Akron does well, in any sense, is stop the run. So they were like 40 positions nationally higher than Western Michigan in run defense a year ago. So And then they brought a lot of pieces back. They added a couple pieces, like you mentioned when we talked about that. So, like, they ran the ball relatively well against Akron, but still had some issues. And then they faced a much easier run defense and ran the ball really well. So I think Marshall's probably somewhere in the beefy middle of that, between those two. And maybe we'll learn something about this run game. I just want to see, and we'll go offense. Then I guess we can go defense if we've got anything. The defense is hard to talk about right now. They've played two pretty bad offenses.
Right. It's like watching Mike Tyson in some of his early fights. Actually, I watched him knock Pinklin Thomas across the ring, in the ring right outside the Las Vegas Hilton, with one of the great left hooks I've ever seen in my life. That's kind of what that defense looked like against Western Michigan. Western Michigan had no shot.
Yeah.
They had one punch and missed it.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is, Vanderbilt beats Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech beats Marshall. What am I taking from that? I have no idea, except this still looks like, I don't know what the line was going into this week.
A lot.
Yeah, it's a lot again.
40.
I think that's about right.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know why I suddenly jumped onto that, but it's hard to, like you're getting to here, it's hard to kind of grab onto what's the intriguing matchup here.
Yeah, I want to see Will Howard keep getting better. I just want to see Will Howard keep getting better. You
but isn't
saw
that
it
relative too?
Yeah, but I want to see the non-opponent stuff, like some of the layered throws. It doesn't matter who you're playing. If you can layer a throw, you can layer a throw. I want to see some downfield stuff. It doesn't matter who you're playing. Can you be accurate down the field? He's still kicking himself for missing that ball to Jeremiah Smith down the field. That would have been a big play, ignited this entire crowd. He would have, been able to celebrate with Jeremiah on another big connection. And you can tell how angry he was that he missed that. Well, he didn't get a real chance to go truly down the field again in that game. Yeah, the next drive, he hit Emeka Ibuka on probably his best throw as a Buckeye so far. He hit Brandon Ennis on a fourth down that I thought was a really nice throw.
I like that bullet he threw to Jeremiah Smith right here on the slant.
Yeah, no, he's had some good moments. I want to see that downfield stuff develop before he gets into Big Ten play. Make sure that you're confident in that aspect of it. And, if we can see that from Will Howard this week, Andy.
You mean 3 verts and maybe a dig underneath?
Yeah, but if we can see that from Will Howard, Andy, I think you're on the right track heading to Michigan State the next week.
I think he's been pretty good downfield. He missed a couple throws. He also had one where the ball just slipped out of his hand.
That can happen.
He missed Jelani Thurman. That was a bit of a wobbler he threw there. It was a bit too high as well. But look, he's not going to be perfect. He was 10 of 10 to start. I think he was really good in that game, and he's been pretty impressive so far. So this is all nitpicking, but I think it's valid to go through as the competition gets more and more intense. I do think that I'm going to be curious to see if Chip Kelly shows us anything more. We saw more against Western Michigan than we did against Akron. I don't know if he needs to show us more against Marshall. I actually don't really see the point of showing us anything more because unless you're trying to put something on tape to get teams to prepare for you and then you maybe spin something else out of it the next couple weeks, I don't know. But it doesn't really feel like there's that much of an incentive to go down your play sheet even more than we've seen so far. Like we saw the speed option in week 2 against Western Michigan. I don't think we really saw that in the opener. We saw a lot more of the tight ends. I actually found the stat this week that the 14 personnel run play, that had never happened before in Ryan Day's tenure. So that was the first time that's happened. You have to think that Chip Kelly's influence is showing up there with the tight ends. A lot of the pre-snap motion stuff is tight ends motioning. So, yes, we've seen some stuff from Chip Kelly. I don't know if we'll see more. I don't think we need to, though, because what's the point, right? You don't want to give away your secret weapons.
What I've liked is the different things we've seen from the same sets occasionally. He's playing with people's heads right now, in my opinion. He's setting the table. Oregon's going to have to prepare for a lot of stuff.
Iowa, too.
Well, Iowa, yeah, definitely Iowa. They're going to have to prepare for a lot of stuff. You got to have it in your head. They ran this out of it. Wait a minute, they also ran this. Wait a minute, they also ran this out of that. I think he's doing almost a master class in setting up opponents down the road. At the same time, his team found its, like I keep using that term, his offense found its mojo against Western Michigan. Yeah, it was against Western Michigan. That's okay.
They hit a gear, Tim, against Western Michigan that you want to see championship teams hit.
Right. But that's the point. They can go off on almost anybody because they have the talent on this offense. That doesn't mean you're going to do it consistently against an Iowa defense or against an Oregon defense, but you can. It's there.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
And I don't want to go back to talking about other teams, but Like, I was one of the most impressive performances on Saturday, and I do not care who they played. They could have been playing Ohio Northern. I was super impressed with Tennessee. Like, if you can hit gear against FBS competition, I think you're really good. Ohio State's the same way with the Western Michigan thing. I don't care who you're playing. The gear that they hit there in the first half, and, or I guess, was it the second quarter that they really just exploded? It's been a week and a half now. Like,
the whole first half.
Yeah. That's a gear that I think you have to hit against those kind of teams.
I think they scored on every possession.
Like, I don't remember when Georgia struggled with Kent State a couple years ago. It's like, I don't want to see that from my championship teams. And I know they won the national championship that year, but, like, I want to see you go out and decimate a team. And I think that's what I want to continue to see from Ohio State against Marshall. It's like, okay, we don't think this Marshall team is that good, but how good are you? How much better are you? Vegas says it's going to be 45-5. Go do it. Okay, don't make it.
Oh no, I've said that all along. Beat teams the way you're supposed to beat teams.
Absolutely, and I think
that's always a line. By the way, I want to hear you assess the bottom half of the MAC.
Well, we've already seen two of them:
oh my
Akron
gosh.
and Western Michigan. Kent is going to get it again this week. They play at Penn State.
Yeah, they're getting paydays, but that's about it.
Yeah, the Bobcats go to Kentucky to play again, and I think that could be a letdown spot for Kentucky. So watch that.
What did Toledo get? $1.2 million.
Toledo got
to play at Mississippi State.
They technically got $1.7 million according to Kyle Rowland for moving a game that they cost them $500,000.
The domino effect. Yeah.
Mississippi State gave them 1.2 and to go kick their tail, and then you've got Northern Illinois beating, but that's the MAC hour is later.
Well, that means Toledo could compete in the Southeastern Conference, not win all their games.
That's what I like to hear.
But, I mean, they can beat Vanderbilt. They can beat Mississippi State.
Here, Andy.
They maybe could beat Texas A&M.
Tim.
What?
I dare you.
Or Florida.
Actually, I double dog dare you.
To what?
To go on Paul Feinbaum's show and tell him that.
Oh, I would tell him that in a heartbeat. I owe him about 6.
Andy, we're going to get out of here. Any closing thoughts on Ohio State Marshall? Look, the off week, I'm not going to lie.
They can beat South Carolina. I'm sorry. I got a whole list in my head.
The off week, kind of tough to get through because Ohio State had only played twice. We don't have a big sample size. A lot of teams now have 3, which is, like I said earlier, a quarter of the season. For Ohio State, it's only 2 of 12. So we don't have a lot that we've learned. Anything else before we get out of here, before we hear from Ryan Day in the morning?
Well, I think the defense always says, a lot of these guys could start on pretty much every other team in the country. I think watching the rest of the country, you feel pretty good about that statement. And I think that's really important for this week as well. These defensive players to get an opportunity not only to play when the game's out of hand, but also have those second-team guys in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like we talked about this, that, it was Denzel Burke who was ejected and Jermaine Matthews had to come in, but there was a scenario there where it was Caleb Downs that was ejected for targeting, and it would have been Malik Hartford or Jalen McLean going in there to play. I think you need to have those two playing more with the first team just to get them more involved and have more reps. I want to see more of Arvell Reese with the first team unit there. I want to see more of Caden McDonald. Like the guys that are starting to play at starter level, as Ryan Day says, they need to be getting involved even more just because you have to be ready if there is an injury, if there's a targeting penalty, if there's something holding someone out of the game. I think that's what you got to use this time for, not just to beat teams, but to also use your depth to beat them.
I'm holding up my hand because they got to get Devin Brown more time.
Yeah.
Maybe Julian Sayin. I mean, you saw on Saturday, Wisconsin lost his starting quarterback, and his mojo went out the door with him.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, Locke played decent a couple of times in the second half. You saw what happened with Texas. Quinn Ewers suddenly, an abdominal strain or whatever it was, thought it was a rib to begin with. But Arch Manning, ballyhooed, whatever, goes in there and starts hot, then goes into a cold spell and comes back. That's against UT San Antonio, which, as you pointed out, is not very good. You never know when the injury bell is going to sound.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important now, I think, to get Devin Brown even more time because you have 2 guys behind Will Howard who have not played. Well, Devin Brown's not played very much football, and Julian Sayin's barely played at all in college football. You got to get those guys in the game and let them play some when maybe the game's not necessarily on the line, but when it's still, hot, so to speak, middle of the second quarter, whatever you want to call it. I think it's imperative now for Ohio State, for Ryan Day and his staff to kind of live by what they said they were going to do during the spring, is get a lot of people a lot of quality playing time.
Well, and you also saw Texas left tackle Kelvin Banks, one of the best players in the country, regardless of position.
Yes.
He went down. Is he healthy? I don't know, but they had to go to a backup left tackle. You saw Georgia have a defensive tackle, one of their starters, go down. Man, they would love to have a second-year kid from Suwanee, Georgia, to step in and play the way Caden McDonald can. So, like, you're seeing, like, the injury bugs start to creep up for some of these teams, like you said, at quarterback, but also at tackle, both defensive and offensive. Like, some receivers have been in and out of the lineup, running backs. Like, Ohio State's got to play depth. And you have to take care of business and put your foot on the pedal from the first snap in order to get your depth in there.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be important this week, is to get off to a quick start, to get that depth. Because, yeah, Michigan State, I don't want to say they're, like, bad, but, like, I don't think they're great. You still don't want to have to rely on, okay, we need to get a blowout on the road at Michigan State so we can get these guys more reps. We need to really blow out Iowa so we can get these guys more reps.
Is my opinion.
That's what I'm, but like
you're saying,
you have to be able to do this against Marshall.
Right.
That way, if you run into a Kentucky-Georgia situation at Michigan State and somebody gets ejected, you're not relying on somebody who hasn't played.
Right.
So, like,
that's my point.
I really like that, Andy. That's a great way to end the video as we get out of here. They're going to kick us out of the horseshoe at some point. Tim May, the 41-year vet.
Like Saturday morning.
Yeah, Saturday after, it's 8 o'clock after Ohio State Marshall.
Yeah.
It's the Monday after Ohio State's first idle week of the season. We do this every Monday here in the Horseshoe. If you like the program, subscribe below. Make sure to like the video. It helps us out a lot. Comment on it. I've been trying to get to the comments more and more from the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. If you see a YouTube comment from Lettermen Row, it's me. And that's Tim May, the 41-year vet. That's Andy Backstrom. It's me, Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to the Monday after Ohio State's idle week. The Monday before Ohio State Marshall. We'll see you guys in the Horseshoe on Saturday, right here in this building. I won't be standing in the end zone while they're playing. I'll be up in the press box. But we'll see you on Saturday for Ohio State versus Marshall at noon. If you can't make it, it's going to be on Fox. If you can, we'll see you here in the Horseshoe. If you see us, say hi. For now, we're going to go get back to work. We'll be in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on Tuesday for Ryan Day's press conference, on Wednesday for some player interviews, and we'll be back on the YouTube channel Thursday and Friday because we are there every day. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys at Ryan Day's press conference on Tuesday.